Hello, everyone, and welcome to our IELTS teacher training. In today's teacher training, we mainly focus on IELTS speaking part 3. And before we continue, let us first have an overview of our training or course training. For our IELTS teacher course training, we have here three phases or three stages. So we start with knowledge acquisition. Then in here we cover the four areas in IELTS. So we have speaking, writing task 1, task 2, listening, and reading. After that, after we cover everything here in stage 1 or phase 1, we move to phase 2, which is skills acquisition. So in here, we are going to learn on how to teach and practice teaching. We also have to learn here test taking skills, like how to ace in or how to get a higher band score in IELTS academic courses or course. And in the last phase, which is mastery, so that's in here, we're going to explore on how to make an effective assessment in writing and in speaking. To continue, we are still here in phase 1, which is knowledge acquisition, more specifically speaking. And we have covered speaking part 1 and part 2 and half of part 3. And today we're going to cover here speaking part 3, fluency and coherence. Now, let's have first a brief overview of what IELTS speaking is. Now, in IELTS speaking, there are three parts, and the total time for this entire test is around 11 to 13 minutes. So we have speaking part 1. This is also called the interview, and the duration for this test is roughly 3 to 5 minutes, and there is no preparation time. And then there is a speaking part 2, which is also called the individual long term. The duration for this speaking roughly lasts for 4 to 5 minutes, including preparation time. And finally, we have speaking part 3. This is also called the two-way discussion. And the entire duration for this part is roughly 4 to 5 minutes, and there is no preparation time. Now let's move to speaking part 3, which is also called the two-way discussion. And these are the criteria in which the candidate receive an award. So let's begin first with the fluency and coherence. Then there is like LR or lexical resource. In other words, is vocabulary, GRA, grammatical range and accuracy. And finally, there is PR or pronunciation. Now let's check here how to get a band 7 for each criteria. So we have here for fluency or FC, the candidate must understand the question or task, speaks at length, and the answer must be logical and relevant. For lexical resource or LR, the candidate here uses wider range of vocabulary to discuss unfamiliar topics with flexibility and accuracy. So take note, it says here with flexibility and accuracy. For GRA or grammatical range and accuracy, the candidate here uses combined simple and complex sentence structures with less frequent errors. And finally, for pronunciation, the candidate must be generally understood and certainly with very little L1 accent or first language accent. Now let's check here on how to get a band 7 for fluency and coherence in speaking part 3. So the first criteria is to understand the question or the task. The second one is to speak at length. And the third one, the answer must be logical and relevant. Now let us check here first, understand the question or the task. Now we have learned in a previous meeting that in IELTS speaking part 3, there are three main types of questions. So we have here giving reasons, making comparisons, and the third one is giving advantages or disadvantages. Now, here's the example of the three different types of questions. So, for example, here, question number one, it asks the candidate to give the advantages. And the second question here, it asks candidate to give the reason or reasons. And the third and last question here, the candidate is being asked to compare two things or two places. Now here for understand the question again, we have three main types of questions. Okay, so we have questions that ask candidates to give reasons, to make comparisons, and to give the advantages and disadvantages. Now let's move on to speak at length. Now, what should the candidate do to meet these criteria? Now, in order to meet this criteria, the candidate must follow here a certain structure. So we have a certain structure in answering the question for speaking part three. So the structure here starts with P or paraphrase, R, which is reason, E, explain, and another E here is example. So here's the model answer for speaking at length in speaking part three. So as you can see here, there is a structure and the candidate here uses complex sentences to extend his or her talk. And that is what we called here to speak at length. And the last criteria here, again, this is the structure for speaking at length. So we have paraphrasing, give the reason or point, explain the reason or point, and then give example. So take note that the example here must be facts, not personal experiences, all right? So that means the example here must be the examples that are generally observed experience, okay? And not personal experiences. So how to paraphrase? Now there are only two main ways to paraphrase or in paraphrasing. So we have here the use of synonyms and changing the word function. So for using the synonyms, so we have an example here. We have two questions here. For example, why do people have a very strong bond to their hometown? So as you can see here, the model answer here uses synonym for reason. We have, in my view, bond, connection, and hometown, place. Okay, so the candidate here is using synonyms. The same way in speaking question number two, in what ways can people improve their hometown? So we have here the synonym for improve is betterment, okay, or improve their hometown, that contributes, all right? Do, okay, what can they do? So contribute. And hometown here, the candidate uses the synonym for that word, which is birthplace. And people here, the candidate here uses synonym, which is residence, okay? So that's how simple paraphrasing is. Okay, so again, for paraphrasing, that means the candidate here uses synonyms or just simply change the function of the word, okay? And again, for example, or for the last for E, all right, the last E, which is giving an example. So the example here must be generally observed experiences or facts. Okay, so take note, there shouldn't any personal experiences. All right. Now, to understand the again, this is how the candidate must speak at length. Okay. Now, moving on to the last criteria, which is making the answer logical and relevant. Now, making the answer logical and relevant, again, is if we review the last session, the candidate can only make the answer logical and relevant if he or she understand the question or the task. Okay, so as you can see here, there is a relevance or connection to this first criteria and the third one, okay, which is making the answer logical and relevant. Okay, so Again, to make the answer logical and relevant, the candidate must understand the question or the task. And we have learned that there are three main types of questions, all right? So we have giving reasons, making comparisons, and giving advantages or disadvantages, all right? Okay, so why is it so? How is understanding the question or the task is connected to the third criteria, which is making the answer logical and relevant? So as you can see here, to make your answer logical and relevant, one must effectively use transition words, or one must make the ideas flow smooth and coherent. Okay, so for example, here we have one apparent reason. So um, basically, the type of question here is giving reasons or asking for reasons. So which is why the main transition that is being used here is to give reasons. All right. So we have here one apparent reason is that, etc., etc. Now let's check here. Let's check here the type of question which is giving reasons. All right. So these are the three examples here. Uh, Example questions that ask the candidate to give reasons. So, for example, we have here, why do some adults dislike reading? What sort of problems do adults have if they can't read or write? And how can people be encouraged to read more? Now, let's check here that the main transition words and phrases that must be used in this type of question is transition words that give reasons. So for example, we have several examples here. We can say, for example, one major reason, one main reason, one apparent reason. The primary reason to this is another point to consider, etc., etc. Okay. Now, if we compare this type of question to making comparisons, all right, now, in questions like making comparisons, for example, the questions here, question number one, how is buildings such as school different from a theater? Are modern theaters the same as old theaters? And which is more important to a town, a sports center, or a museum, and why? Now, in this type of question, all right, the main transition words or the main way to connect the idea, all right? The main way to connect the idea or ideas is the use of complex sentences that shows contrasts. So, for example, we have here um, uh, uh, words that shows contrast. So we have here, for example, even though, while, or whereas. So here's an example here. As you can see, if you compare this, if you compare the answer to the question about giving reasons, okay? We don't say here another reason, the first reason, and another point to consider is, etc., etc. Now, the candidate must simply give a direct comparison or contrast to what is being asked. Okay, so for example, the question here, how is building such a school different from a theater? So the example here, schools and theaters have tons of differences, and one biggest contrast is their purpose. Okay? So as you can see here in this type of question, the candidate didn't say um, first reason, didn't enumerate. Now, in other words, the candidate didn't enumerate, all right, the reasons for of their differences. So again, he or she has to give a direct answer to a direct comparison to things being asked. So for example, here, the candidate is being asked to compare building a school and a theater, right? So if you look at the answer here, we have the biggest contrast is their purpose. Now we use a complex sentence, whereas schools are mainly used for education, theaters are mainly designed for entertainment. So the answer is very direct, okay? Now, for example, at school, we mainly go there to study or do research, while in theaters, We go there to enjoy the performances of the artist. So these are the major differences of these two important buildings. Okay. So if you compare the answer to this question and the question about asking reasons or giving reasons, there's a big difference on the approach, all right? So one is enumerating the reason, and the other one is just giving a direct contrast to things that being asked, okay? Now, the same way with a type of question which is giving advantages or disadvantages. Now, we also have to, or the candidate must also use more effectively on how to connect the ideas. And to do that, one has to simply use the transitional words and phrases or cohesive devices that shows, that gives, that enumerates, I would say, the advantages and the disadvantages, okay? Example questions here like, what are the advantages of ebooks? What are the advantages and disadvantages of having uniforms at work? What benefits can children gain from playing games with other children? And what benefits can one can get from collecting as a hobby, etc. So in here, the main transition words here is enumerating the pros and cons, or enumerating the benefits and drawbacks. And like questions that ask you to give reasons, you're going to enumerate the reasons by using cohesive devices or transition words to give reasons, right? But here, we're going to enumerate the candidate is going to enumerate the advantages and disadvantages of things being asked using the cohesive devices also that shows advantages and disadvantages. So for example, we have here, there are several advantages and disadvantages of something. The first main advantage of this is that, another benefit, etc. However, there are also disadvantages of something. The biggest drawback is, and so on and so forth. So as you can see, these are the three main types of questions. And the reason why we need to understand them, because it's much easier for the candidate to use cohesive devices. So the main cohesive device or transition words to be used in questions to give reasons are those that, of course, give reasons. For comparisons, we should give a direct answer by showing contrast or similarities between two things asked. And to do that, we are going to use here complex sentences that shows contrast. And finally, for questions about advantages and disadvantages, the candidate must simply have to use here transition words and phrases that shows benefits and drawbacks. Okay, so that is the main reason why. That is the main reason why the candidate must understand the three main or three general types of questions in IELTS speaking part 3. Okay. So that's the end for this training today. So again, we are still here in stage 1 or phase 1, which is knowledge acquisition, mainly focusing on IELTS speaking. And we have just completed here IELTS speaking part 3. So, and if you want to book for IELTS class or IELTS teacher training, so please don't hesitate to go to our FB page or contact us via Zella or WhatsApp, or email us at IELTS lessons5644@gmail.com. All right. So thank you so much for your time, and hope to see you in next training session.